My name is Daniel Carter, and I worked the night shift at Ashwood Underground Station. It wasn't a busy station. In fact, after midnight, almost nobody used it anymore. The city above was alive, but deep underground, the platforms felt abandoned. Every night my job was simple. Walk the tunnels, check the cameras, wait for the last train to arrive at 3 a.m., then lock the station. On my first night, the station manager gave me a radio, a ring of keys, and one warning. Never enter the last carriage of the final train. I laughed. Why? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the empty platform. Then he quietly said, "Because it never arrives empty." Before I could ask another question, he walked away. At exactly 2:58 a.m., every light on platform 4 flickered once. The loudspeaker turned on by itself. "Attention! Final train arriving." The rails began vibrating beneath my feet. A cold wind rushed through the tunnel. Seconds later, the old subway train slowly rolled into the station. Its brakes screamed as it stopped. Every carriage was brightly lit. Every seat was empty, except the last one. The lights inside the final carriage were completely off. The doors slowly slid open. No one stepped out. No one stepped in. I shined my flashlight toward the darkness inside. Nothing. Just empty seats. Then my radio crackled. A frightened voice whispered, "Don't look inside for too long. Because if you see someone, they've already seen you." I lowered the radio slowly. The voice had disappeared. Only static remained. I stood alone on platform 4, staring at the open door of the last carriage. The entire station had become unnaturally quiet. Even the usual sounds were gone. No humming lights. No distant trains. No dripping water. Nothing. The darkness inside the last carriage almost seemed alive. I took one careful step closer, then another. The flashlight beam slowly moved across the floor. Old newspapers, dust, empty seats, no passengers. I let out a nervous breath. "See," I whispered to myself, "nobody's here." The moment I said those words, a loud bang echoed from somewhere deep inside the train. I jumped backward. The flashlight shook violently in my hands. The sound had come from the very end of the carriage. I pointed the light toward it. Nothing. Then another noise. Not a bang this time. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Walking toward me. The strange part. The footsteps were inside the train. But nobody was there. Step. 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 The sound grew louder with every second. I backed away until my shoulders touched the tiled wall of the platform. The footsteps stopped. Silence. For nearly 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then every light inside the last carriage suddenly turned on at once. I blinked. The carriage looked completely normal again. Empty seats, metal poles, nothing unusual. I almost laughed. Maybe the manager had been trying to scare the new guy. Then I noticed something. A single seat near the back of the carriage was occupied. I was certain it had been empty only seconds earlier. A man sat perfectly still. Dark gray coat, black gloves, old-fashioned hat pulled low over his face. He wasn't moving. He wasn't breathing. He simply sat there, looking down at the floor. I raised the flashlight toward him. The beam reached his shoes, old leather boots, covered in dirt. Slowly, the light climbed higher. His hands rested on his knees. His fingers were unnaturally long. The beam reached his face. There wasn't one. The hat covered nothing, only darkness. A hollow black void where his head should have been. My flashlight immediately flickered. When it became steady again, the seat was empty. The man had vanished. I turned around instinctively. The platform behind me was empty. Then, a quiet voice spoke directly beside my ear. "You look too long." I spun around. Nobody. The train doors suddenly slammed shut. Without warning, the train began moving again. There was no driver, no announcement. It slowly disappeared into the tunnel. As the final carriage passed me, I looked through its last window. Every seat was occupied now. Dozens of silent passengers sat perfectly still, and every single one of them turned their heads toward me at exactly the same time. The train disappeared into the darkness. I stood frozen on the platform, unable to breathe. Dozens of pale faces had stared at me through the windows. None of them blinked. None of them moved. They simply watched until the last carriage vanished into the tunnel. Then, the station became completely silent. I checked my watch. 3:01 a.m. According to the schedule, I was supposed to lock the station and leave. Instead, every light on platform 4 suddenly switched off. Only the emergency lights remained, bathing the platform in a dull red glow. My flashlight was the only real source of light. I turned toward the security office. Halfway there, the loudspeaker crackled again. Static. Then a calm female voice echoed through the empty station. "Attention passengers. The last train has been delayed." I stopped walking. That made no sense. The last train had already left. The announcement repeated. Exactly the same words. Then it changed. "Attention. One passenger is still waiting." I looked around the platform. Empty. No one. The lights flickered again. For a split second, I thought I saw someone standing at the far end of the platform. When the lights steadied, there was nothing. I hurried into the security office and immediately checked the cameras. Platform 1. Empty. Platform 2. Empty. Platform 3. Empty. Platform 4. My heart stopped. The platform wasn't empty anymore. A little girl stood near the yellow safety line. She wore an old white dress. Her long black hair covered her face. She wasn't moving. I knew she hadn't been there 30 seconds ago. I grabbed the station microphone. This station is closed. If you can hear me, please step away from the platform. No response. She remained perfectly still. I zoomed the camera closer. The image became grainy. Her feet were floating a few inches above the ground. I immediately looked back toward platform 4 through the office window. Nothing. The platform outside was completely empty. I looked back at the monitor. The girl was still there. Only now, she was facing the camera, even though I had never seen her move. The camera suddenly glitched. For less than a second, her face appeared. There were no eyes, no nose, only a wide smile stretching across her entire face. The monitor went black. Every camera inside the station shut off. At the exact same moment, I heard tiny footsteps, not on the cameras, not through the radio, in the hallway outside my office. Slow, barefoot, walking toward the door. Tap, tap, tap. They stopped right outside. Someone gently knocked 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. Then, in the voice of a little girl, I heard the words that made my blood run cold. Excuse me, I missed the last train, and now I need yours. The little girl's voice echoed through the empty station. I missed the last train, and now I need yours. Every instinct told me not to answer. I slowly backed away from the office door. The knocking stopped. Silence returned. Then, the door handle began turning. Very slowly. Once. Twice. The lock rattled violently. I held my breath. Whoever was outside pushed against the door. Not hard. Just enough to let me know they could. Then everything stopped. For almost a full minute, I heard nothing. I finally forced myself to look through the small window in the office door. The hallway was empty. No girl. No footsteps. Nothing. I unlocked the door and stepped into the corridor. The station felt colder than before. My flashlight beam barely reached the far wall. As I walked toward platform 4, I noticed something strange. Tiny wet footprints covered the floor. They looked like the footprints of a child. Bare feet. Fresh. They led away from the office. Toward the tunnel. I followed them to the edge of the platform. The footprints stopped exactly at the yellow safety line. Beyond it, there was only darkness. I pointed my flashlight down the tunnel. The beam disappeared into the blackness. Then I heard it. A train approaching. Impossible. The schedule showed no more trains until morning. The rails began vibrating beneath my boots. A cold wind rushed out of the tunnel. The loudspeaker came alive again. Attention passengers. Special service arriving on platform 4. There had never been a special service. The headlights finally appeared. But something was wrong. The train wasn't using its normal white lights. They were deep red. As it rolled closer, I realized it wasn't one of our subway trains. It looked ancient. Its paint was peeling. Most of the windows were cracked. Rust covered the doors. The train slowly stopped in front of me. Every carriage was dark, except the last one. Its lights were bright. The door slid open. The little girl stood inside. This time I could see her face clearly. She looked completely normal, except for one thing. She smiled, without moving her lips. Then she quietly said, "You got on the wrong train." Behind her, dozens of silent passengers slowly turned their heads toward me at exactly the same time. Then every one of them stood up together. Every passenger stood up at the exact same moment. Not 1 second apart. Not one after another. Together, like someone had given them a silent command. The old train remained completely still. Its doors stayed open. No engine noise. No announcements. Only the low electrical hum from the lights inside the carriage. The little girl stepped backward without taking her eyes off me. She disappeared into the aisle. The other passengers didn't move. They simply stood there, facing the platform, waiting. I backed away until I reached the emergency phone mounted on the wall. I grabbed it and pressed the emergency button. Nothing. No dial tone. Only static. Then a voice whispered through the receiver, "Don't let them leave the train." I almost dropped the phone. "Who's there?" No answer. Only the sound of someone breathing slowly into the receiver. I slammed the phone back onto its hook. When I looked up, the passengers had moved. They were no longer standing inside the carriage. Now they were standing directly behind the open doors, only inches away from the platform. Not one of them blinked. Not one of them breathed. I counted them. 1, 5, 10. There had to be at least 30 people. Men, women, children, everyone dressed in different styles, as if they had come from different decades. Some wore modern jackets. Others were clothing that looked 30 or 40 years old. One man wore a subway uniform almost identical to mine. His badge was covered in dried blood. Then I noticed something else. None of them cast a reflection in the train windows. The glass reflected the empty platform behind me, but not the people standing inside. Suddenly, every light inside the train flickered once. When they came back, one passenger was missing. I frowned. Then another disappeared. Then another. One by one, they vanished without moving. Within seconds, only one figure remained. The subway guard. He slowly stepped onto the platform. His boots echoed loudly. Unlike the others, he made real footsteps. He stopped only a few feet away from me. His face was hidden beneath the shadow of his cap. Then he slowly lifted his head. I expected another smiling monster. Instead, I saw a terrified man. His face was pale. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked exhausted, almost broken. He spoke so quietly I could barely hear him. "You still have time." I stared at him. "What?" "You have to close the last carriage." "What are you talking about?" He glanced nervously toward the train. "They're asleep while the doors stay open. But once they close," his voice began shaking, "they wake up." I heard the warning chime. Ding, dong. The automated announcement echoed through the station. Doors closing. The guard's eyes widened. "No." He looked directly at me. "Don't let the doors close." I ran toward the train. Just as I reached the last carriage, the doors slammed shut in front of my face. The train lights instantly went dark. Complete darkness. Then, every window slowly filled with pale, smiling faces. Not 30, hundreds, pressed against the glass from the inside, all staring directly at me. Then every mouth opened together, and in perfect unison, they whispered my name. The train doors remained shut. Every face behind the glass smiled without blinking. Daniel stumbled backward until his legs hit a metal bench. The passengers never moved. Not a single hand touched the windows. Not a single mouth opened. Yet whispers filled the station from every direction. Some came from the tunnel. Some echoed from the ceiling. Some seemed to come from directly behind him. One sentence repeated again and again. "Open the door." The emergency lights flashed once. When the red glow returned, the train was gone. The tracks were empty. Daniel stared in disbelief. A train that had filled the entire platform had vanished without making a sound. His radio crackled violently. For several seconds, only static came through. Then an older man's voice whispered, "If it disappears, don't follow it." Daniel grabbed the radio. "Who are you?" A pause. "I worked this station before you. My name doesn't matter anymore." "What happened here?" Another long silence. Finally the man answered, "Every night the last train arrives. It waits for someone. If nobody gets on, it leaves. But if someone follows it, they never come back." Daniel felt a chill run through his body. "What do you mean?" "The station isn't the end of the line. There are stations that don't exist on any map. You don't buy a ticket. You get invited." Before Daniel could ask another question, the radio emitted a loud burst of static. Then it went completely dead. He hurried back to the security office. The CCTV system had somehow powered itself on again. Every camera was working. Platform 1, empty. Platform 2, empty. Platform 3, empty. Platform 4, empty. Then a new camera feed appeared. Camera 13. Daniel frowned. There was no camera 13. Ashwood Station only had 12 cameras. The screen showed a subway platform unlike anything he'd ever seen. The walls were covered in cracked white tiles. The station signs were faded beyond recognition. The lights flickered constantly. The platform was full of silent passengers standing perfectly still. All of them faced the tracks, waiting. At the far end of the platform stood the little girl in the white dress. She slowly lifted one hand, not waving, pointing straight toward the camera. The image zoomed closer by itself, behind the camera's reflection in the glass. Someone was standing, a security guard, reflective jacket, flashlight. Daniel's heart stopped. The guard slowly turned toward the platform. The passengers all smiled at exactly the same moment. Then the screen went black. One sentence appeared in white letters. Next arrival, 3:33 a.m. Daniel looked at the clock on the wall. It read, 3:32 a.m. The clock clicked over. 3:33 a.m. Every light inside Ashwood Station went out. For 3 full seconds, Daniel stood in complete darkness. Then the emergency lights returned. But something had changed. The station no longer looked familiar. The walls were older. The advertisements had disappeared. The modern ticket machines were gone, replaced by rusted metal turnstiles that looked decades out of date. Daniel slowly stepped into the hallway. His boots echoed far louder than before. The air felt colder, almost impossible to breathe. He looked toward the station entrance. It wasn't there anymore. Instead of glass doors leading outside, there was only a long concrete tunnel stretching into darkness. His radio suddenly turned on by itself. No static, only a calm voice. Ashwood Station. Final destination. Daniel ran back toward the security office. It was gone. The room where it had stood was now another platform. Platform 5. Ashwood Station only had 4 platforms. His pulse raced. No, this can't be real. He pulled out his phone. No signal. No GPS. The time on the screen read 3:33 a.m. The seconds never changed. His battery dropped from 82% to 41%, then 9%, before the screen shut off completely. A cold breeze swept across the platform. Far down the tracks, 2 white lights appeared. Another train. It moved silently, much slower than the previous one. As it came closer, Daniel realized something terrifying. It wasn't running on rails. It floated a few inches above them. The metal wheels never touched the track. The train stopped directly in front of him. Every carriage was completely dark, except one, the last carriage. Its door slowly opened. Inside stood the security guard from camera 13. He looked exhausted, older. His uniform was torn. His flashlight barely worked. He stared directly at Daniel. You still have a choice. Daniel stepped closer. Who are you? The guard slowly removed his name badge. The letters were scratched almost beyond recognition. Only one word remained. Daniel. His blood ran cold. The guard looked exactly like him. Older, thinner, covered in dirt and dried blood. I've been here for 17 years. Daniel shook his head. No, I started this job 3 nights ago. The older Daniel gave a sad smile. So did I. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded subway map. I've tried every tunnel, every exit, every maintenance shaft. There isn't a way out. He handed Daniel the map. Every station had been crossed out with red ink, except one, at the very end of the line. It had no name. Only one word was written beside it. Home. Daniel looked back up. The older version of himself was gone. The carriage was empty. Then the train speakers crackled. A familiar voice echoed through every carriage. It wasn't the little girl. It wasn't the station announcer. It was Daniel's own voice. Clear, calm, emotionless. Doors closing. Please remain inside forever. The train doors slammed shut. Daniel threw himself forward. His shoulder crashed against the glass. The train didn't move. Not yet. Instead, every light inside the carriage turned on. One by one, rows of silent passengers slowly became visible. They weren't looking at him anymore. They were looking at the older Daniel standing near the back of the carriage. He hadn't disappeared. He had simply walked deeper inside. The older Daniel slowly raised one hand. His lips moved. Daniel couldn't hear him through the glass, but he understood the words. Don't come in. The train speakers crackled again. Final boarding. One passenger missing. The doors unlocked with a loud metallic click. Daniel immediately stepped backward. He remembered the warning. If the doors opened, something wanted him inside. The little girl suddenly appeared beside him. Not inside the train. On the platform. Only a few feet away. She looked completely normal now. No terrifying smile. No missing eyes. Just a frightened little girl. She tugged gently on Daniel's sleeve. Please. My mom is still on the train. Daniel looked toward the carriage. A woman sat alone near one of the windows. She waved desperately, crying, Be please. Help my daughter. Daniel's instincts screamed that it was a trap, but the woman looked so real. The little girl began crying. I don't want to be alone. Daniel slowly reached toward the train door. The older Daniel inside violently shook his head. No. He slammed both fists against the glass. For the first time, Daniel heard him. It isn't her. The little girl instantly stopped crying. She smiled. Her neck twisted almost 180 degrees until she was looking directly into Daniel's face. You almost believed me. Every passenger inside the train slowly stood up again. This time, they all began walking toward the open doorway. Not fast, not slowly, perfectly together. Step, step, step. None of them blinked. None of them made a sound. The woman who had been crying was smiling now. Her mouth stretched wider than any human mouth should. Daniel stumbled backward. The passengers continued walking, but none of them crossed the doorway. It was as if something invisible prevented them from leaving. They stopped exactly at the edge, waiting, watching. The older Daniel shouted again, "Close the door. It's the only thing keeping them inside." Daniel searched desperately. Near the platform wall hung a bright red emergency lever. Emergency door override. Without thinking, he sprinted toward it. The little girl screamed, "No!" He pulled the lever with all his strength. A deafening alarm echoed through the station. The train doors slammed shut with incredible force. Every passenger froze instantly. Their smiles disappeared. The lights inside the train went black. For 1 second, everything was silent. Then the train began pulling away. As the last carriage disappeared into the tunnel, every window filled with hundreds of pale hands, slamming violently against the glass, trying to get out. The older Daniel remained standing inside. He looked directly at Daniel. Then, just before the train vanished into the darkness, he smiled, not like the others, a tired, grateful smile, as if Daniel had just saved something far worse from escaping. The station fell silent. For the first time all night, there were no whispers, no footsteps, no announcements. Daniel leaned against the platform wall, breathing heavily. His hands were shaking so badly that he almost dropped the flashlight. He kept staring into the tunnel where the train had disappeared. The older version of himself had smiled, not because he was happy, because he knew something Daniel didn't. The emergency alarm suddenly stopped. Every light returned to normal. The station looked ordinary again. Modern advertisements, clean platforms. The security office had returned. Platform 5 was gone as if it had never existed. Daniel almost convinced himself he had imagined everything. Then his radio buzzed. The supervisor's voice came through. "Daniel." Relief flooded through him. "I'm here. I've been trying to reach you for 20 minutes. Where are you?" "I'm on platform 4. A long pause. Then the supervisor quietly answered, "Platform 4 has been closed for 30 years. Daniel laughed nervously. "What?" "There was a tunnel collapse in 1996. No train stopped there anymore." Daniel slowly looked around. The platform sign above his head clearly read, "Platform 4. His flashlight drifted toward the tracks. There were no rails, only solid concrete. The tracks had vanished. His breathing became shallow. "I'm standing here right now." The supervisor didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded terrified. "Daniel, turn around." Very slowly, Daniel turned. At the far end of the platform, the old subway train had returned, completely silent. Its headlights were off. Its doors remained closed. The older Daniel stood outside the last carriage now. He wasn't trapped anymore. He looked exhausted. His hair was gray. His uniform had almost rotted away. He slowly raised one finger, pointing behind Daniel. Daniel spun around again. Nothing. He looked back. The older Daniel was pointing more urgently now. Daniel slowly lifted his flashlight toward the ceiling. The beam landed on a security camera, a modern camera. Its small red recording light blinked. Then another camera. Then another. Every camera in the station turned toward him at exactly the same moment. Their lenses moved together, watching, tracking. The station speakers crackled. No static, only one sentence, spoken in Daniel's own voice. Subject accepted. Every camera's red light changed, from blinking to solid. The older Daniel closed his eyes, then quietly whispered, "Now it knows who you are." At that exact moment, Daniel's employee ID card vibrated inside his pocket. He slowly pulled it out. The plastic card looked normal, except for one detail. His employee photo was gone. Instead, the picture showed him standing inside the last carriage, smiling, even though he had never boarded the train. Daniel couldn't breathe. The employee ID trembled in his hand. The photograph showed him standing inside the last carriage. He was smiling, not the frightened smile of someone pretending everything was fine. It was the same unnatural smile every passenger had worn. His own face, but no longer his expression. He looked up. The old subway train was gone. The older Daniel was gone. Platform 4 was empty. Only the station speakers remained. The supervisor's voice suddenly returned through the radio. "Daniel, answer me. I found the old station records." Daniel grabbed the radio immediately. "I'm here. Listen carefully. The security guards were never attacked. They all disappeared after. The transmission cut off, then restarted. But it wasn't the supervisor anymore. It was Daniel's own voice. Calm. Perfect. I've been here for years." Daniel threw the radio across the platform. It shattered against the wall. The voice continued anyway, coming from every speaker in the station. "You already know the truth. You just don't remember." The lights flickered once. Then everything changed again. Daniel wasn't standing in Ashwood Station anymore. He was standing inside the last carriage. His flashlight lay on the floor beside him. The train was moving. Outside the windows, there was nothing. No tunnel. No lights. Only endless darkness. Every passenger sat silently in their seats again. None of them looked at him, except one. At the very back, the older Daniel. He slowly stood up, walked toward him, stopped only inches away, then placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "I fought it. For 17 years, I thought I could escape. He looked directly into Daniel's eyes. I never understood. It doesn't trap people. It replaces them. Daniel's heart pounded. What does that mean? The older Daniel sadly smiled. It already replaced me. Then, he began disappearing, not fading, breaking apart, like old television static. Within seconds, nothing remained. Only his flashlight rolled across the floor. The train speakers announced one final message. Next stop. A pause. Ashwood Station. The train slowed. The doors opened. Daniel stepped onto the platform. It looked exactly like the station where his shift had started. Modern lights. Modern signs. Everything normal. His phone suddenly turned back on. Full battery. The date showed the same day he had started work. 3 missed calls. 1 voicemail. His mother's voice. Daniel, congratulations on the new job. I hope your first night shift goes well. His blood froze. He looked toward the station entrance. The station manager walked toward him with a friendly smile, holding a radio, holding a ring of keys, exactly as he had on the very first night. The manager handed him the keys, then quietly said, "There is only one rule. Never enter the last carriage of the final train." Daniel stared at him. He had heard these words before. Every word, every pause. The manager frowned. "Are you all right?" Daniel opened his mouth to answer. But before he could speak, the station speakers announced, "Final train arriving on platform 4. Some stories end. Some stories repeat. And somewhere beneath Ashwood, the last train is still waiting for the next night guard."